Welcome back for another video. This video we will focus on another virtualization lab. This lab will consist of using a domain controller and 3 file servers. The intention of this lab is to create a DFS file server system to allow replication of data between all 3 servers to give you the maximum uptime. So we're going to use DFS technology. We're also going to dabble into setting up disk quotas. So this way you can limit your users on disk space they use, or you could just use it for monitoring and see what type of disk space they're using. So without further ado, let's get started. So on the domain controller, I have a simple domain setup that I think has locked me out. There we go. Okay, so we have a simple domain controller, 1 domain controller. I have file servers, 3 file servers. That's what we'll focus on with this. So the domain we are using, we will have a 4-user setup just for testing. And then the file servers, what we want to do is we want to set up we're going to set up shares. I've gone ahead and created a disk drive, an e-disk. In a real environment, you would have multiple disks for multiple usage. I'd recommend that. So if users are going to have a home drive, set up a home share, put it on one disk, put profiles on another disk and a PST on another disk, and if you have different sections and departments in where you are, then you would set up different disks. And the reason why you do that is so you don't have each one of these items clobbering for disk space. In this case here, it's just a lab, so we're going to run from the same disk. So on file server number 2, we'll do the same thing. You set up file server number 2. And we want to have a like-for-like environment, and file server 3. Now these are running more of a demo version, non-activated Windows. I'm not pirating Windows at any stretch of imagination. I'm just using a 128-day trial just to set up the video to show you how this works, and then they're going to be decommissioned. So that's why you're seeing activate. So again, same folders. So between all 3 servers, we have the same folder structure. And I'm just going to minimize this here so you can see the information here so you know what server we're on. And file server 1. So we will treat file server 1 as the primary, the main server. So when you set up your users in here, if you want to set up roaming profiles, and I know roaming profiles in some cases is archaic, you use folder redirection, but a lot of people still use roaming profiles, especially for diagnostics of users' desktops and things like that. So you would normally put a profile path in here. For instance, if it's FS1, then you could say it's FS1 and then you would do % username %. And now when I copy that, when I click right there, it puts username 1. So now that user has that. We could go to profile here and we could do this. So I'm just kind of showing you what this would do. So you can actually copy the same line you put in, because username %, if you're not aware of this, it will automatically populate that username. So now when these users log in, they'll actually write a profile to this profiles folder if it was shared. At the moment we're not shared. I'm just going to show you something. So let's start off with doing that. So we want to connect to FS1. Should make sure we can actually get to it. I did just build these. There you go. So FS1. So let's do this. When you hit FS1, it doesn't get anywhere. So what we want to do, we know it's online. We want to go to FS1 and let's just share this folder. And when you share out a folder from permissions 101, you just default share it, everyone full control, because you're just letting everybody get to the share. Now, if you want to lock it down properly, you want to use security and you want to put users or groups in this. It's recommended now use role-based computing, so you can set up roles. So if users are supposed to be in here, then you put all users. In this case here, users should be here. So we could put different permissions on it. For now, we just want to just see the share. So let's see how this works. And there you go. Now we actually have a share. It's showing profiles. So that's all we need at this point, because we just want to just prove that it's there. Okay, so I'm just going to close that. And that reference there, we'll come back later. Okay, so let's go to file server 1. The first thing we need to do on file server 1, let's remove this share, take it back to the default. So advanced, and let's take away the share. Okay. So we have department, home, profiles, PST. Now, PSTs, if you have an exchange system or you want people to put their PSTs elsewhere on a different drive so it doesn't go against their quota, what we're going to do here is we're going to create home drives with each user, and they're going to have a quota of 1 gigabyte. So it's kind of like giving them a Google Drive, right? So with this 1 gigabyte limit, you're giving them a limitation of 1 gigabyte. So this way they can keep their files clean, because this isn't meant for their work data. It's meant for like their personal type data. If you're working in, I mean, unless you're standalone, if this is where they're putting all their files, that's great. But if you have a situation where you have different departments and different sections, you want to keep their work in that department or section, because if they happen to be away, somebody needs a file, we can access it that way. So that's how I laid it out here. So that's what we'll do now. What we want to do now is add some roles. So we go to the server manager, and then we'll add roles. Give it a second to catch up. And there you go. Click next, role based, next. That's the computer we're working on, next. Now we want to open up the file and storage services and open up file iSCSI services. And we want to add 3 roles. We want to add DFS namespace, DFS replication, and file server resource manager. This is FSRM. This will give us our quota tool. And that's it. Next. Now what we want to do is make sure we have a source installed. So we have the CD installed. It's on D. That's the operating system ISO. We've mounted to the server. So now we have, or if you're using physical machines, you put the CD in, because it's going to need the CD to install the software that we're asking for the roles to be installed. And as you see above here, that's the path. Just we want it to go to D. Install. Now what I usually do is we'll let that run. I usually go to all servers and do it. You don't necessarily need to install on all servers. It's just if one becomes unavailable, you do want to have the tools enabled. So let's go to all servers and do the same thing. Now wait a minute. There you go. Next, next, next. You notice FS2. and files, DFS, SRM, and replication. Same thing, we want to make sure you have the D drive there. Now what we'll do is, a lot of people say, hey, you don't need to put a path. Well, let's see. It should remember where we installed from last time, so that should be fine. Now onto the third server. Again, too diligent, too quick there, too quick. It's 3. We're waiting for that. Let's go back to 1. 1 is completed. And let's see if it's giving us anything. Installation is completed. Cool. So we can close that down. Go to 2. Almost done. 3. Once again, let's add this. We don't want data duplication. We'll do that in another video. But we basically want those tasks. And let's do the install again, because as approved, we didn't need to put CD. Okay, so close. Check here for the flags. Flags are saying succeeded. Okay, close. Let's get rid of this. Now when we're back to number 3, let that finish. So let's go on with number 1. So now with your new added software, you want to go to Windows Administrative Tools and DFS Management. So I want to right click, pin to start. FSRM, let's pin to start. So now we have those 2 tools. Let's go to the other ones. And apologize if my fans have climbed up. Good old Intel throttling. Open the wrong tool. Administrative Tools. Right click, pin to start. And right click, pin to start. This way we have our tools right there. And number 3, it's finished. Should be the same result. Completed. Okay, so we can close that. Let's go here. Pin this to start. Pin this to start. Now if you want to, you can also go to more and pin it to the taskbar. It goes down here. This way you have tools here, so you don't have to go to start button at all. Okay, so open this up again. Okay, let's go back to server 1. Now server 1 we're going to treat as the primary. Just going to add this to the taskbar. I like it on taskbar. Okay, so now we're going to open the DFS management tool. And we see namespaces and replication. Now what we want to do is we want to create a namespace. So what's going to happen is normally, as I showed you a minute ago, normally when you go to servers, you're going to go to the server name and then look for shares. If it has no shares, it's not going to show any. But earlier we showed that it had that one share. What we want to do now is we want to access this by domain name. So in this case, because I have a domain built, the domain server, the DC, domain controller, has these shares. And these are normal shares for logon scripts and so forth. Those are always there from a domain controller. What we want to do now is we want to be able to share files from the domain, not the server. Because the idea here is to have a fault tolerant failover. So let's say you have 3 different sites and this site goes offline. If this goes offline, then the users who are connected to this server can't connect to their files. With setting up a DFS namespace, what we're going to do is anybody can get files from anywhere because they're going to the domain target, not the server target. So let's start that. Let's right click on this, new namespace, or you can click over here, new namespace. So first thing you want to do is add a server. So let's look at FS1. Okay, and there's FS1. And now what do we want to call this? So let's start with home. We want users to be able to have a drive, an M drive, an X drive, whatever it is. And we want to make sure enable 2008 mode, because DFS, when it came around in Windows Server 2000, if you uncheck that, it's in 2000 mode. So 2008 mode and forward, because this is the newer version of it. And we will keep that. We want domain, not standalone. So we're going to use this. So this is how you will get to the share instead of using the server name. So let's click next and create. We've now just created a namespace, home. So now let's go onto the home drive so we can see this. And let's make a folder, test1. This way we know that that's where it is. Now let's go back here. And we want to click properties. And everything's working. Okay. Now we want to highlight over here. Namespace servers enabled. And let's look at the properties of this. Okay, we know where it's going. Great. That's namespace. Now you notice how there is no other namespace, right? What we want to do is we want to go in here and we want to figure out what to do with this. So I'm going to back up for a minute. Yes, delete it. We don't want this namespace. We want to start again. So let's go new namespace, server, FS1. And then we want to call it home. Now, the most common mistake people make, which I showed you earlier, is just click next. What the problem is, now you're actually pointing it to a default target. What we want to do is point it to where we need it. So you have to click edit settings. And see this path? I want to change that path to where we really want the folder. So now we know it's going to go here. And then we want to put everyone having rewrite permissions, and you can customize that as well. And then administrators have full access. So this way the administrators can manage it, and the users have read-write access to get to the home. So let's click OK. Now we can say next. Same thing. And create. So now we've actually created this. Now we want to test this. So let's go here. Build a domain. And we want to click home. So CompuGuy home, that's my domain name, and there's the share, and there's test1. Now from here, if I want to create test2, let's go back to our folder on the server itself. Test2. So from the share, I was able to write to that location. Now this is one share. Let's do this with the other ones so we can have a complete set here to test. Let's do it again. Namespace, same server. This time we're going to call it profiles. Edit settings. And we want to put it to the proper folder. And we want to do the same permission. Now we could do custom as well. We can put more permissions, but we could do it at the NTFS permission level. This is just to get it set up and running. Same thing, default, and create. So now we have profiles. So you can do the same thing. And there's profiles. Test. We go back to the E, profiles. There you go. So we've just proved two of them working. So let's finish this off. FS1 again. Browse. Right. We know the server name. Now we want to do dept again. Dept. This way you have control over where you're putting your data. I just went through that because the same thing is default. So now the other one we need to do is PST. So let's confirm. We need dept home profiles PST. We have dept home profiles. We need PST just to make it complete. Same thing, FS1. Next. And now we need PST. Edit setting. Put the path to where we need it. Change permission. And next. As you see, it's going to create it. So now you don't have to set shares up for this because DFS will automatically share it out. So we have dept. I'm going to put a test in every one of them. Home, profiles, and PST. Put a test in PST. Okay, so we confirm now we have that. So now we have these servers over here. Dept has nothing in it. Home has nothing in it. Profiles have nothing in it. And PST has nothing in it. What we want to do is we want to be able to replicate this data up to there. The reason for doing this is, as I said, let's say server goes offline, or let's do Windows patching. You patch the server, users are connected, they're using their home drives, they're starting to write data, and then suddenly you need to patch. You need to kick all users off, make sure they're offline, make sure the files are saved and nothing's open, and then patch and reboot the server. The server's down, users can't access. With this setup right now, we're going to replicate these folders with the data that's inside of them over to the second server. Now this is a virtual lab, so it can go pretty quick. If you had terabytes of data, let's say at different cities or different areas of the city, at different sites, different buildings, it doesn't matter. It will then travel over the network to those servers. So I've just confirmed there's nothing in these folders. So we will start with the folder that has the most files, is home, because on server 1, on the home drive, it has 2 folders. Okay, so now let's go to replication, and replication group, let's call it on a multi-purpose replication group. Let's call this file services. Domain, same. And now what we want to do is add members. So we need to add FS1, check name, okay. FS2, check name, and let's go FS3, check name. So all of these members are going to be added to be a replication group. So this way 3 sites will have 3 copies of the data. Now if you don't have disk space, this is going to affect your storage space. The good thing about this is now that you have 3 servers replicating, it will now have 3 copies of your data in 3 different locations. So if any server goes down, you now have the maximum uptime. Or if you're doing Windows patching, when you take it down, the users could still connect to that path. So back to this, replication partners are all in. Next, and we're going to do, you could do a full mesh, which replicates with all members, or you can have one replicate downward. So let's do full mesh, because we want, if it changes here, it moves back to here. If it changes here, it moves back to here and here. So let's do a full mesh. And it says there are 10 or fewer members in the replication group, right? So if you have more members, you want to go here. So let's do full mesh for this. Next, replicate full bandwidth. Now you could change your bandwidth if you're limited. In this case, I'm going to use this, replicate continuously, because we want files when they're saved, we want them copied. We don't want certain times of the day, unless you're reason for doing this is to have just a replicate once a day. In this case, I want to have all the time replicate happening. Next, primary member, we'll make fs1 the boss, the primary. And then now we need to add the paths that we want to replicate. So we want to replicate home. And we could change permissions as necessary. Let's just use existing. Okay, we also want to replicate profiles. And then we also want to replicate the other drives, just to show that we can replicate all the data. So that file server, if it goes down, everything is still accessible anywhere. Next, and now it says here, path, membership status, disabled. Let's edit that to be enabled. And now let's, the data, now this one here is for home, right? We need to tell this where to put home on that server. Well, we just put it there. Next. And we go here. Now this is all part of the setup, right? So you have to make sure that your home is going to home. In my case, that's where I'm putting it. Let's go next. And again, profiles, enable. And you just have to go through this to make sure you're putting the data in the right location on the opposite servers. Let's enable it here. Now, if you only need 2 copies because 2 sites are perfect enough, you can then say, okay, I don't need this data going to that one, but maybe just there. It's up to you how you decide to make your changes. Let's go here again. So you just have to match it to where you want it to go now. We already know where it's coming from. We want to just make sure where it's going. PST. For a video, we're doing a lot more than just one folder, but this is the whole idea. You want to confirm that the things you're doing works, not just here's a folder, set up DFS, but goodbye. I just want to show you a working solution. So we have all the folders happening. Great. So now replication will not begin right away. Okay, so now let's minimize this. We're on FS1, right? So on FS1 in the depth folder, let's do this. Let's copy this. Let's have some fun. Go into test 1, paste. Oh, all right. So because we're sharing it out, what we want to do is we have to access it from the network share. Let's go to server 2 and let's see any of these shares are updating. So depth, there's nothing there, there's nothing there, nothing there. Okay, so they haven't replicated yet. And we've logged off the server. Okay, so nothing yet. Let's go back to server 1. Let's open up the DFS tool. File services. Enabled, 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 enabled. They're all enabled. And let's go back to here. Fresh. Namespaces are all set up. Now we have replication working. What we want to do now is we want to actually make it work, make it replicate. So connections, we know they're there. Saved folders. What we want to do now is we want to go back to here. Enabled. 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 Okay, we're enabled there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a different machine now. This is how we test. Minimize this. Pull up this. Let's go to compuguy.local.home. And inside of test 1, I want to make a new test. Test 2. Inside test 2, I want to do test 3. Okay. So now let's go back here. And let's go to FS1. Okay. See how the shares are there? Depth. Did test 1. Did home. Test 2, test 3. Okay. Let's go to FS2 now. Now FS2 isn't doing anything yet. So now we need to go back in to FS1. What's the difference? FS1, shares, sharing, it's shared as depth, right? Home, sharing, home, profile, sharing. Okay, so let's go see and make sure that we have these shares running here. So let's go here. Is this shared? No. We need share. Done. Okay. Share. Now this is just a lab. Of course, you're going to lock it down with proper permissions. But for this lab, we're just going to share them because you have to be able to see them. So the whole idea, remember, you're creating a file share, and now you're creating DFS to those shares. So let's go here. Let's make sure we're shared here. So if I'm going too fast, just just pause, have a look at what I'm doing. I'm just sharing same folders, just standard share. At this point, we're not too concerned about security because it's just a lab. The idea here is to get it working, and then you can lock it down to permissions to get users, lock users out of it. So now we have all our shares. Let's go back to DC1. FS2 is now sharing. FS3 is now sharing. So let's go into depth. See how now there's files showing up? Now that we've shared it, all the copies of data have been made. So let's see that again. Right? I'm gonna go to local. Not gonna show anything because they're almost hidden. But let's go to home. So let's make new folder test 3. Copy. Let's just make a mess. Okay. So home. And let's go to depth. Again, let's make a mess. Okay. And let's go now to PST. And let's go to the other one we did. So we did depth, home, profiles. Let's go to profiles. Okay, copy and Control V. All right, so we've made our point. So we're going now back to FS1. we see the data has been written. See the data has been written, and see the data has been written. Right? What about FS2? Because remember, we wrote to the domain copy. Again, it's replicated already. So now, all 3 file servers, you'll see in a second, have replicated data. So once you set up the shares, so that was one thing you could do first, is when you go to your file server, you set up your folder, set up your share, basic share, and then you go in and lock it down to who you don't want into it by just doing security. So if you just wanted user number 1 in there, you put user number 1 or group, whichever you want to do. So at this point here, we just created shares on 3 servers. And we've gone into DFS and we've said, here's the DFS targets using this pathing because it's the domain name. You can name it anything you want, but this is what you would do. Now, everything in the domain is accessible this way. So you could have all your shares that you want to replicate across these 3 file servers. You could have them do that. Now, what you could do, let's say there's data that you only want in 2 sites. So let's say this one here, we have, let's call this world 1, right? And server number 3, we want world 1 as well. So this way you don't have to replicate with all servers. World 1. So let's go back to the boss server, number 1. Let's create another namespace, new namespace, same server, FS1. This is going to be the boss, but we're not going to be bringing it there. So world 1, edit settings, all permissions. Now, you see how now this server, it's going to look locally. It doesn't have it, right? So what we're going to have to do now is go back, and we actually have to put where we want it to be. So FS2 is a server. That's where we want it to be. Reaching out to talk to it. This is why I installed this tool on all the servers, because in some cases, if you can't get to this tool, you need to use the other server. But if you do want to create replications between 2 other servers, you want to be able to do this. So right now it's connecting to the server, and there you go. So world 1, edit settings. Now, because we're on the server number 2, right? World 1. And we want to set all permissions. So because we told it the namespace servers from FS2, the share is world 1, and where the target of it is. Click OK. Next. 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 Okay. So now let's go back to world 1. Sorry, server 2. And don't forget to share it. Right? Share. It's already shared because we created it. We want to go over here to our replicate, which we will be setting up in a moment. You want properties, and you want to make sure this is shared. So we have world 1 on 2 different servers. Let's go back to server 1 where we're doing the DFS. Let's open this up. So world 1, now we want to make it the target, right? We have all that. Now we want to make sure this is enabled. Let's go namespace, it's enabled. They're all enabled. So once that's done, that's done. Now let's go to replication. So now we want to create another replicate or another folder. So we could go in here and we say, in here, we want to say new member, but we don't want a new member. What we want to do is new replicate folder. So the new replicate folder, the primary is going to be 2 because 1's not part of the replication. So let's add the path, world 1, and we leave the default permissions. You could change them if you need to. And now what we want to do is the members are 1 and 3, right? So we want the member to be 3. We don't want 2 to be in this. So on 3, we need to make sure we point to the right folder. So now we've enabled 3 to replicate with 2. Number 1's not going to be part of it. So there we go. So now let's go to 2. We have nothing in here. Let's create. Okay, copy this as for some dramatic effect. So let's rise that down, close that. That was FS2. Let's go to FS3 now. Does it have data? Not yet. Right? So now what we need to do is go back to 1. Let's go DC, right? Let's do this. FS3. World 1. FS3 has nothing. FS2. World 1 has data. So now we need to go back to the DFS and see what we've missed. The namespace is World 1, File Services. Here's the world. Definition disabled, enabled. So we now want to make sure that this is going to replicate. Fresh. Go to 3. Let's go to 3 here. Let's confirm. It's shared. Default share. Okay, that's enabled. Let's go to File Services here. Let's take a look at the replication. Replication is enabled. Replicating to eWorld, World 1, staging. Okay. World 1 enabled, staging there. Okay. So now this is the first time I've tried this, doing it from the single server. So let's see if this is replicating yet. And there you go. So it just takes a minute or so. Once you set it up, it goes. Sometimes time is your friend. So that will replicate between the two. So now if you wanted to monitor this from this server on number 3, right? Let's minimize this. We're on number 2 right now. So number 1's been the DFS boss, the management. You notice here, it has that because that's replicating with the other ones, but it doesn't have the other replications, right? Server number 3 has nothing because 2 was set up as the lead, as the root. So that's why that's listed there. If you need to see them, let's say number 1 goes offline and you can't get to your other namespaces. You right click, you say add namespaces to display, and all the ones you've added to your domain are here. So if you needed to see them here, you could say, okay, and now we see them. So now you can see the configuration that's going on. Same with replication, right? File services, there they all are there. So if you need to see everything on your other servers, you just right click, say add namespaces to display, and these namespaces are listed. That's it. That's DFS. And same thing goes with if you delete a file, right? Let's say my world, let's go back to department. Let's say I delete all these replicates. Okay. Now on server 1, let's go back here, and that was under department. It's gone, right? Which leads us into our next segment. What we want to do is be able to restore files if people delete them. So let's add on another function. So let's close DFS, close the DFS tools. Okay. What we want to do now is we want to enable a neat feature that's been around for a while, and it's something I believe you should always have. If users delete their own files, They always call you or they call someone else. Let's say you have a service desk or something. They'll call your service desk and say, hey, I need to restore a file. And then the people who do the restores will have to get a ticket or something to dig up the data that was lost. What we could do now is there's files there. So let's go on the rooted folder here, properties. There's a thing called previous versions. Now, once we enable it, we could see all the previous versions. So if you've changed or edited a document and you don't like the most current version because somebody deleted data out of it, you could pull up the previous version of the document and be able to restore your own files. So let's add that functionality. Since we've gone to redundancy with our servers, let's add this. So on file server 1, we need to go to the disk manager. So you can type disk manager if you want. So the disk management, you want to go to the volume, right click, properties, and you want to go to shadow copies, and you want to enable the shadow copy. Now when you enable it, by default, it's going to set up the initial copy. Now let's go settings. The settings, it just uses 4,000 megs, so 4 gigs. So it's using 4 gigabytes of cache limit to do this. Now you may need to adjust this number for as many users or as many changes that'll happen on your server. You could do no limit, but then it takes away from your disk space. So you just have to be cognizant that you will lose some data, your disk space, for keeping the previous copies around. So every change is made will take some space. So if they delete a 4 gig file, it will keep a 4 gigabyte cache of that data. So what happens is once it gets full, it just then stops remembering that last version. So you want to try and have the happy medium of how far back you need to go. So let's go with the defaults for now. It's enabled. And let's go to server number 2. Same thing. Same thing on the disk, properties, shadow copies, enable. Okay, and that drive is enabled. Let's go to 3, same thing. Okay, I know it's disk management, but I take disk manager. So properties again, shadow copies, enable. Okay, so now we're enabled on shadow copies all across the DFS cluster, because this is essentially is a cluster without using Windows clustering. So now on file server 1, so let's do it from a client machine. So I'm going to use DC1 as a client machine. So let's go here to let's go to home. Okay, so in test, let's make a new folder and call it try and save this. Inside of there, let's create several documents. Okay, copy, and let's paste. So we have 11 copies, right? So we got 11, 12 copies. So we have all these files in here, and let's make sure it's replicate. So how do we test that? FS1, going to home, try and save this, and there they are. FS2 to make sure we have replicate. And we go to home, save this. So it's there. I don't need to go to the third one. So now, using the proper connection that you're going to point your users to, I'm going to now delete all these test copies just to clean up the folder. Okay, so they're gone. We're confirmed they're gone. We can go over to here. FS2, home, they're gone. FS3, home, they're gone. Okay, back to FS1. Let's be consistent here. Home, they're all gone. So let's go to our client computer. So here I am, I'm a user. I'm going in and say, I don't want 6 to 11. delete. Okay, so now let's go back one more level to home and say, hey, there's files missing in here. I need those files back. Let's go to home. Let's right click on try and save this because the next root up. And let's go to previous versions. Now see how there's nothing there, right? What we need to do now need our previous versions to be able to work. We just enabled the get my mind straight here. We just enabled the shadow copy of the volume. Just make sure this is working. Okay, shadow copies there. See, 320 meg used already. Okay, previous versions. See how there's shares on the drive, on the volume itself. So everything on that share should be able to be recovered. So let's go back. Now, if I do it on the server itself, let's confirm. Properties, previous versions. See how it's going down now? And there's all the previous copies, right? So now I'm going to go try and save this on this volume. Can we do previous versions? There's nothing there yet. Let's go in here. And you can also go here, restore previous versions, and it's not recording anything yet. Now maybe it's because I needed to let it replicate for a little bit. So I jumped the gun. So let's copy, let's delete all this and start over. So when you set up previous versions, you want to give it time to back up. You want to have it time to capture. So what we want to do is copy again. Okay, we have 13 copies. Confirm 13 copies are in all locations. Okay, now we want to do, now you can't save a file and then delete it 2 seconds later and expect it to come back. But you can right click on the file, restore previous versions. If there was any adjustments, so now there's no data in there, right? So let's do this. Okay, put on word wrap. You see some data. Save. There you go, 1K. Now we can go here, restore previous version. Still not registering. Do a refresh. I think we need to adjust our times. So when I tested this previously, I've waited a little bit. So let's just confirm that this document is indeed 1K. So on all servers has that. We go previous versions, still not registering. That's fine. Let's go here, documents 1K. So now, go back to home and save this. What will happen once we have the previous version set up? Let's try and go directly to the share. FS1, home, save this, and let's go previous versions. Still not registering. So we need to go and find out how often this previous version is happening. We go here, properties, shadow copies. See how it says create now, right? What we need to do is change this setting. So schedule, what we need to do is say daily, every day starting 7 a.m. We need to change the schedule to make sure that it will do it every day, not just certain times. Something always overlooked. Now we have previous versions. We want to go in, confirm that starting at 7 a.m. every day, this volume is doing shadow copies. Right now, settings, schedule, right? Weekly, I want it daily. Okay, every day. And it says 7 a.m. What we want to do is want to change this to be daily, advanced, repeat task every 10 minutes. We want to have this thing snapshot. That's if you schedule it. So you want to have it snapshot every 10 minutes. And let's actually change that. Advanced every. Now, you don't want to do this that often, but it's probably good hourly depending on how you set it up. In this case here, I want to set it up so I have some more copies. So 40, let's go back here, change this. Okay, schedule, daily, advanced, repeat every 1 minute. You're not going to do this normally in an environment, but this is just for me to have copies. So I'm going to create now, and let's go back to server 1 and make sure that schedule's on for every 1 minute. Shadow copies, settings, schedule, daily 7 a.m. Repeat this task every 1 minute. Now you're going to adjust this to how you need it to run. So let's go back. It's been about a minute. Let's see if we have any more captures. 42. Okay. So this file now, does it have restored versions? No. Let's go in and add a word wrap on. And let's say my test. Copy and save. So now we have 2 edits file. 2 edits. Now suddenly we go in and see, hey, I don't want that there. Somebody just made an edit to the document. I want to open that document. That says that. Yes, that's the one I want. Let's restore it. And are you sure? It's restored. Now let's go back in. The proper one is back. So this allows you to give your users a way to restore their file. There's nothing there now because we've taken it away. Or we can do this. So let's take away all 13 copies. And now we can right click on the folder above and we can say previous versions. There's differences. There's all the difference. That's what we like. We want to restore that. And now let's go back in. We are able to restore all the files that were deleted. And this will happen on all servers. So let's try it again from our client. So here we are, got home. Try and save this. We have the blah 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 document. We're going to make some changes now. Confirm this from the user side. So here I am a user. I'm going to save it. Now we have a different version. And I also want to be destructive here, so I'm going to delete all the copies. And there you go. Let's go back out, go back in. You see the document has that, and somebody comes in and says, hey, what's this doing here? There shouldn't be any changes to this document. So we want to right click, restore version. There's the little other version. Let's see if that's the version we want. Yes, that's proper. Let's restore. It's been restored. Let's go back in, and there we go. The better copy is there. So let's do this one further. So let's do this. Okay, save it. And then now, let's do this. Make it 5, 8, 6, 9, 4, 32. There. Let's make that change. Now we have 2 saved changes. Right click, previous versions. Right, because we had the document still open, it's only going to show this. That's the original one. Refresh. Okay, that's the one. Now let's say I'm going to put okay, save it, refresh, right click, somebody comes back in, says there's different changes, right? So because we only have the one change in the last minute, that's what we're going to record. So prove that works. Now we see all these folders gone. Let's go back here to this level and say restore previous versions. Well, it's saying there's several types now. Let's go here, and there's all our files. We need those files back because somebody deleted them. Click restore. Now if we check here, right, restore, they've been restored. Now we go in here, and there's all our files. So this is how you could restore your own files on all servers. Let's go here, right, there they are. Or we're replicating this, so let's do this, right? That's on the domain share, the DFS. Let's go back to FS1, FS1 home. They're all copied there. And they're all copied there. So we can go back to home, and we can say restore previous versions. Previous version had that. I don't want that folder structure somebody did. So restore. Let's go home again. Refresh. And go in here. Okay, let's go back to home again. Properties, previous version, home. That's what we want. Restore it. Restore it. And close. Go back in. And it's still keeping it. That's good. Okay. So, for the most part, you're going to be accessing the shares this way. So if we decide we want to take these out now, we could now right click on home, help you guy. Let's go back home, and we could do previous versions. There's nothing of that folder. So if you delete something from this layer, what might have to happen at this layer, at the top layer, you want to protect it so they can't delete files out there. You want to do it so they can do it in here. So this way you can go back out here and the users can just restore from here. Once you do that, you should be able to utilize your previous versions. So that's previous versions. Now the final part of the video is we want to set limitations. So let's say you want to set up a 1 GB limit, so people cannot save any more than 1 GB for their own selves. So let's open up here the file resource manager tool, file server resource management. Let's go to quota management, And now this is something you'll see neat. So we're going to create a quota and we're going to apply it against our home drive. So the users can't put anything more than what we say. So now we could put, let's say, 2 GB limit. Now we don't want to do 2 GB because we want to give them something we want to give them. So let's customize and let's go to 1 GB. Hard quota. Now hard quota means when you put 1 GB, as soon as they hit the 1 GB, they cannot write any more data. A soft quota means you got 1 GB and you're just monitoring. So this will let you pull reports to see if they get if they go farther than 1 GB, you can see who's passed it and then what you need to do. Maybe make a different another quota for certain users. So let's leave this as hard quota, 1 GB. We're going to copy it from the 2 GB profile, and it's going to be applied to eHome. So 1 GB. Click OK, and click OK. Template name 1 GB data. Home drive. So now we have 1 GB data home drive. That's the quota template you just put here. That's going to be applied against the home drive. So let's go back to the files. So on home here, this whole drive has a quota. Each person who puts data here will have a 1 GB limit. So if user 1 logs in, user 1 will have a limit to their folder that they wrote to. Now let's go over to server 2 and let's see FSRM carried over here. Let's go here, FSRM, quota management, quotas. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to do the same thing here. Create a quota, browse. We want to put it on the home drive. Click OK. And now what we want to do is choose a quota. Now it hasn't replicated down, so let's go here to define. And we want to copy the 2 gig. We want to give them 1 gig. So we have to set this up initially. And create, and we'll call this 1 GB data home. And the quota template, 1 GB data home. File server 1, 1 GB data home. Now let's go to 3. And 3 will have quota template. And let's see if we can pull the data down. There's nothing there. So let's do it from here. Create a quota from template. So 2 GB. We want to create a quota. Template name 1 GB data home. Make it 1 GB. Click OK. We have the 1 GB home. Now we want to create a quota. Create quota. Home drive. And we want to use the gigabyte data home. So now anything in this volume, any user that gets created will have a folder with those limitations. So now when we go here to our domain controller, user 1, let's give them a home drive. So let's say we'll give it, let's say we give them the H drive for home. And now we want to path it to be compuguy.local home, and then percent username percent. Click apply, and then same thing. I go here to profile, copy this, But what you want to do is don't use user1. You want to say %, and then copy it. Click OK. Number 2, profile. You want to give them the H drive. And then OK. You click here to 2. It's user 2. See how here user profile's there? Well, let's change that to the proper path. Click apply. Let's go to user 1. Same thing, because we want to go to the DFS share. Apply. So now let's see if we can log on to this machine as a user. Probably won't because of the server, but let's see if I allowed my permissions for this test. So now we want to try user 1. So because you're trying to log into a server, you cannot. So I will have to create a Windows 10, and we'll go on in the next video. I'll come in, we'll go back in and test these quotas, test the drives. But that's it. That's pretty much what you do. You set up quotas. You now have a 1 GB limit to put any folders in that drive. Each folder that gets created, each user drive, will have the limit. So every user will have their own 1 GB. And we've set up namespaces, we've set up replication, and we've also set up the ability to restore your own files using previous versions. So it's a lot in this video, but it's a lot of good information to set up file services in a redundant configuration. So this way, no matter which one goes down, I could still get there. So let's try that. So reboot. Right, before we reboot, let's pull up here. So we're going to go to the share, ComQ guy, and let's go to home. So I'm on that share. I'm going to now reboot number 1. Okay, so now you see it's going down. I'm in this folder, right? See how it's taking a second? Just trying to find a location for it. It's not going to be down, it's just going to move me to the next location. Now if you have a document open, you try and save, it might give you a little error. You click save again, and it would then give you the connection. So I'm there, I've opened this document, test, right? Dump whatever words, doesn't matter. And then notice in here, 1, 2, 3, I'm able to save that data because I'm not on the server. So look what happens if we have 2 servers go down. Again, we're the client, we're still connecting the data. We're still able to get onto it. So they're just replicas. Because of replicas, we can access the files we have. As long as they're being replicated, we can access the files all through the network on any one of those file servers. Okay. We've done home. What about profiles? Yeah, I can still get in there. And one just came back up and this one's up. So we now have a full replicated file server system. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this entertained you and educated you. If you have any other questions about this or any further information you want to test, I have this lab open. It's something I constantly test with. So please like, subscribe, let me know what else you want to see within the server setups. And it's a different direction from my normal channel, but this is where my hobby is and part of my career. So I'm just doing some new things just to test. So again, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you next video. Thank you.